China will continue to place importance on its friendship with Myanmar.
China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi traveled to Myanmar 2 weeks ago, pledging friendship and cooperation between the two countries. Hello, I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C., and this is The Heat. China's foreign minister met with his Myanmar counterpart earlier this month, the first visit he's made since the new president was sworn into office. Myanmar is in a state of transition as it moves forward with its first elected government in more than 60 years. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi's visit represented the latest step forward in a long friendship and comes at a time when Myanmar is undergoing a political transition.
China will never meddle in Myanmar's internal affairs. We respect the political choices made by the Myanmar people and support Myanmar in progressing its national reconciliation process.
Myanmar's Foreign Minister Aung San Suu Kyi and other major leaders, including President Hu Jin-kyo, discussed diplomatic and strategic partnerships. Myanmar plays a crucial role in China's One Belt, One Road initiative, and the countries have long shared economic prosperity.
China and Myanmar are enjoying mutually beneficial economies. China-Myanmar trade cooperation has great potential and room for development. China can be Myanmar's most ideal, reliable, and durable partner in the process of boosting Myanmar's economy and improving people's livelihoods. We stand ready to work together with Myanmar for common development and prosperity.
China hopes to be a supportive neighbor and deepen cooperation with Myanmar's new government.
We are willing to see Myanmar embark on a path of development based on its national circumstances and under the leadership of its new government.
Joining us now to discuss China's relationship with Myanmar, Sun Yun is a senior associate with the East Asia program at the Stimson Center, a non-profit focused on addressing transnational challenges. From Beijing, Victor Gao is an expert in Chinese international relations. Priscilla Clapp is senior advisor to the U.S. Institute of Peace and the Asia Society, and Saurabh Gupta is the resident senior fellow at the Institute for China-America Studies. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Yun, let me start with you. This relationship between China and Myanmar has been a rocky one. It's been beset by problems with China's investments in Myanmar, the construction of a dam in Myanmar using Chinese money, militias along their common border. But now Myanmar's had an election. Foreign Minister Wang Yi has paid a visit to Myanmar. How does the relationship now stand?
In the past 5 years, China and Myanmar certainly have had relationship problems in these bilateral relations. But now we have a new NLD government in place, and both countries are looking forward to opening a new page in these bilateral relations. And both governments are planning on developing this relationship further.
Priscilla, the election that took place in Myanmar was the first election in many, many decades. What are the big challenges that the country faces right now?
The first fair election in many decades.
Okay.
Yes. They have huge challenges ahead of them. First of all, the peace process. The NLD, Aung San Suu Kyi, the leader of the NLD, has already made that the priority of her term. And she's going to have to work very closely with the military on that. Delivering a better life to the people is another huge priority. So she's going to have to focus, or the NLD will have to focus on the economy and developing the country, and delivering a better life to the poorest people, not the richest people. There are many other challenges of, human rights and diversity and equality and rule of law. It's basically a lawless society. Well, it's not lawless, but it's a society where you don't have reliable courts, reliable access to justice.
Victor, China Daily newspaper says the birth of the new government presents a good opportunity for the two countries to overcome past hurdles and ensure their friendship grows even stronger. How big are these hurdles? What are they? And are they going to be able to get over it?
Well, first of all, allow me to congratulate Aung San Suu Kyi and her new government, not only winning the election, but also starting to manage the multiple affairs in Myanmar. I think Aung San Suu Kyi has demonstrated stateswomanship and leadership and strategic vision as well as courage in managing the state affairs in Myanmar. I think as far as China-Myanmar relations are concerned, we are two important neighbors and no one can change that fact. And China and Myanmar need to deal with each other as equals on equal basis and respect each other. And I think there have been some bumps in the relations over the past several years. However, I think the fact that Foreign Minister Wang Yi became the first foreign leader to be invited to visit Myanmar and met with Aung San Suu Kyi and her colleagues indicated that Aung San Suu Kyi as well as new government really attached a great deal of importance to pragmatism and realism, and hopefully this really bodes well not only to China-Myanmar relations but also to Myanmar's overall relations with other major countries as well as the international community as a whole. I think here we are in China very much excited about this new opportunity working with Myanmar's leadership and the people to really help them to get out of poverty very quickly and go onto the route of development and peace and stability.
Saurabh, during Minister Wang's visit to Myanmar, this is what the Myanmar Foreign Minister, Aung San Suu Kyi, this is what she had to say. Let's take a listen to that.
According to foreign policy of our government, we want to cooperate peacefully with the world. We will cooperate for peace and human development.
So she's talking about cooperation. Now, which sectors do you see the best opportunity for cooperation between China and Myanmar?
It will almost certainly be on the development front. China is in a position to provide a lot of investment goods to Myanmar. China also is in a position to provide a good deal of financing for these sort of investment goods. But ultimately, the most important point is for Myanmar to take ownership of its own development strategy. There are areas where external partners can help, but help only so far. It needs to get its domestic legal regime straightened out. It needs to ensure that land reform takes place. It needs to ensure that light manufacturing takes place in the various coastal zones. It is in these areas where China itself grew out of the plan from a very poor society to what has become a middle-income country through labor-intensive industrialization and large public investment, that China can bring these lessons to bear to Myanmar and also assist in Myanmar's transition.
You know, I mentioned at the beginning of the program that there are problems between the countries on matters of Chinese investment in Myanmar, on the construction of that big dam, as well as issues on the border, on militias operating on that border. What specifically are the issues here?
The specific issue along the border is that the Burmese government, some officials and some of the observers and public opinion in the Myanmar society in particular, believes that China has played a role in Myanmar's national reconciliation process that is not positive. So a lot of people in Myanmar believe that the Chinese government, either the central government or the local government, has maintained a support to the ethnic rebels in Myanmar. Well, China does have a relationship with ethnic groups in Myanmar, especially in the northern Myanmar, but that relationship has historical roots, and that the relationship also has a lot of local utilities, especially for the residents living on both sides of the border. So the trade relations among them and even the ethnic affinity among these populations is just real, it's on the ground and cannot be severed. So on that issue, I would say there are misperceptions on both sides about each other's intention and each other's policies. And this is certainly an area that both governments need to work together to clear the misperceptions.
Right, and on the business relationship, there have been complaints on the Chinese side that Myanmar has not respected or complied with agreements that have been made, that in certain instances, agreements have just been suspended unilaterally by Myanmar.
That part is very true, but the Myanmar counter-argument is that the deals that the Chinese had reached was with the military government. So the deals, some of the commercial agreements did not obtain the approval of the public opinion, and it was not supported, and is still not supported by the general population in Myanmar. So when the Then government said that we are following people's will to suspend the Misong Dam project, for example, the Myanmar government was taking a stance between its public opinion and its obligation to its foreign investor. So what is noteworthy is that one project, the Minson Dam project, is not permanently abandoned. So it's only temporarily suspended. Now it's a very important issue for the two governments to work out.
Priscilla, during his visit, Foreign Minister Wang Yi, the Chinese foreign minister, said that China would guide its enterprises toward what he called a more socially responsible role in Myanmar. Let's watch what he said.
It is the social responsibilities of Chinese enterprises to respect Myanmar's social customs and conventions, protect the local ecology and environment, and do more public services. I believe that the mutually beneficial cooperation between China and Myanmar is sure to gain greater development and bring more benefits to the Myanmar people in a new period.
So here we have the foreign minister talking about a more socially responsible role. What does that mean? I mean, how is it going to manifest itself?
Well, Myanmar itself has passed a set of regulations recently that govern large-scale projects in the country for environmental and social impact assessments before any of these can be undertaken. And I believe that China will abide by those rules. It's already happened with several of the projects there, most notably the Lepidong copper mine. And it was in fact Aung San Suu Kyi who led the study of that mine and came to a conclusion that was acceptable to China, and China went along with the restructuring of that deal. And I think we'll see more of that. Many of the deals that are suspended will have to go through this process before they go forward. And it has the new rules will bring the local population into the decision process.
Victor, I want to get on to one foreign policy issue. Jonathan Chow, who is a professor of international relations at the University of Macau, he told the U.S. state broadcasting network, The Voice of America, that Myanmar is now moving towards its traditional posture of non-alignment. Do you believe that to be the case?
Well, I think it is a decision up to the new government in Myanmar and eventually the people in Myanmar to make. However, from the Myanmarese perspective, when they look around outside of their country, I think the best strategy is to treat all the major countries equally and avoid, becoming a victim of ideology or geopolitical competition among major powers. And also, they need to avoid becoming a victim of certain types of ideological push into Myanmar. Therefore, I would say try to deal with all the major countries in the world equally is probably the best strategy for Myanmar. And I do trust the judgment and the stateswomanship demonstrated by Aung San Suu Kyi, and I truly believe she cares mostly for the fundamental interest of the people in Myanmar, and no country in the world should dictate any terms to the new government and people in Myanmar, and eventually the final decision maker should be the Myanmarese government and the Myanmarese people. And from the Chinese perspective, this will work out because we do treat Myanmar equally and respect the people and the government in Myanmar with all the dignity that they deserve. And it is on this basis that all the bilateral relations between China and Myanmar will be conducted.
So, how do you think these foreign relations will be conducted? Will Myanmar adopt a non-aligned posture, as this professor had said? It is a member of ASEAN. It joined in 1997. How will that impact its relationship with China?
I actually do think that Myanmar will stay generally non-aligned. It has a long historic tradition of neutralism, almost isolationism. And while that would, obviously, you don't want to be isolated, at the same time, you don't want to have great power contestation in the part of the world where you reside, especially at a time when you're a poor country and you have huge development challenges, that it becomes so easy to get distracted from those challenges because of geostrategic games. That said, the Bay of Bengal area is going to be willy-nilly a little bit more militarized. There are going to be US naval vessels which will come to Myanmarese port. Already Chinese submarines are there in the Bay of Bengal. India and the US have certain particular cooperation in the Indian Ocean region. So there is going to be some degree of contestation. But we have to realize this, and it's useful to recognize this in context of the South China Sea. There are a lot of open territorial and maritime disputes in the South China Sea. China and Myanmar settled their boundary, and they settled their boundary in the 1950s itself. It's a settled boundary. Of course, it's a porous boundary also.
Right.
So those sort of tensions do not exist in the China-Myanmar relationship, which have with China and Southeast Asia, with the South China Sea littorals. So I foresee that there is going to be a little bit of rejig among the great powers in this area, but I think there is sufficient confidence I have in the Myanmarese government to be able to create certain space for itself so it can be more focused on its development challenges.
Okay, we're going to have to take a break right now. Coming up, how can Myanmar find economic prosperity with China's One Belt, One Road initiative? Our panel weighs in next. Stay with us. You're watching The Heat. Welcome back. We're talking about the relationship between China and Myanmar. The two countries have long been friends, and China hopes to provide support to the new Myanmar government. Still with me, Sun Yun, an expert in China's foreign policy. Priscilla Clapp is a former chief of mission with the U.S. Embassy in Myanmar. Saurabh Gupta is a geopolitical analyst focusing on Asia, and Victor Gar is a Chinese international relations expert. Thanks again to all of you. Yun, Chinese companies are the biggest foreign investors in Myanmar right now, but that investment is not without controversy. Some have accused China of using heavy-handed tactics with their investment, of not taking into account, as Priscilla pointed out earlier on, some of the issues that affect the people of Myanmar, things like environmental concerns, the mass upheaval of people. Will that change?
I think under the new NLD government, this trend is definitely going to change. Actually, the Chinese companies has faced a pretty steep learning curve in their lessons coming to overseas investment. And in Myanmar, this is an example where the Chinese companies have to learn their lessons as they go. So Chinese companies are still making the largest investments in Myanmar. Cumulatively, China occupies about 40% of the total FDI that the country has received. So in the future, with the One Belt, One Road initiative, China will do more. And the Chinese companies are certainly learning more about how to do corporate social responsibilities, how to engage the local community, how to navigate the relationship between the local government and the central government. So these are all lessons that the Chinese companies are learning, but the learning curve is probably going to take longer than we thought.
Priscilla, the construction of the dam that we talked about earlier on, that's been a source of enormous dispute between these two countries. They've tried to revise what the dam is going to do, what it's going to look like, etc. But people in that area still complain that their concerns were not taken into account, that people are going to have to move, that there would be flooding. They also point out that 90% of the electricity, which is going to be generated by a proposed hydroelectric plant, will go to China's Yunnan province.
The Myitsone Dam is a good example of bad Chinese investment because it's designed to serve China, not Myanmar. And that's what irks the Myanmar people. Not only the people, but the government. If China were interested in providing more energy to Myanmar, then they would also invest in the electricity grid. Because the reason they can't put more of the electricity into Myanmar from those big dams is because the grid won't take it. It needs to be rebuilt. And so China needs to think more holistically about the way they're investing in the country. A big dam like that doesn't do anything for Myanmar. In fact, it's being built on an earthquake fault line. Right. At the beginning of the Irrawaddy River, which is the lifeline of the country. No environmental impact statement or assessment was done of the downriver impact of that dam, which is substantial, and I don't see how it could go forward.
Victor, as China begins to think, as Priscilla points out, more holistically in its relationship with Myanmar, how does its signature regional economic initiative, the One Belt, One Road plan, how does Myanmar fit into that?
No, I would say that Myanmar need to do many things on multiple fronts, almost at the same time. And you can either wait until everything is ready and then you do it in one stroke, which is almost impossible, or you come up with a gradualist approach. You start to do one thing at a time, but eventually it's all going to be integrated together for the overall benefit of the people in Myanmar. You know, talking about the relationship of either building the dam versus building up the grids, for example, it's very complicated. You cannot afford for the Myanmarese people to wait until everything is put into place at the same time magically. It's not possible. You have to do one project after another. Myanmar is suffering from a huge shortage of power. That's a reality. Therefore, all the investments throughout the world from all major countries should be very much welcomed into the energy investment in Myanmar. Infrastructure, too, is very much in bad shape. Roads, highways, railways, etc., airports, seaports, etc. And you need to do one project after another. There is no luxury in Myanmar so that people and the government can wait until magic falls from the heaven and everything is upgraded at the same time. Therefore, complaining about realities is one thing. You know, the taste of the pudding is in eating it. Eat the pudding in Myanmar and try to do the real investor in Myanmar and help the Myanmarese people to build up dams, build up power stations, and build a railway, build a highway, build a seaport, etc. This is more proactive approach. Don't complain. Don't point accusing finger at others. There are problems. Let's work out the problems together with the Myanmarese people and the Myanmarese government. But sitting on the couch and accusing all the other real investors in Myanmar is the wrong strategy.
Yun, you want to say something?
Yeah, if I can just say something about that. Well, the very important issue, like everyone has mentioned, is a view of the Myanmar people and what the people want. And if the people are saying no to some of the Chinese projects, then the Chinese investors and the Myanmar government must listen. Everyone recognizes, even in Myanmar, that economic development is important. But I think in the Myanmar society, there is also a value attached to their own environment, attached to their social heritage, attached to their values. And those values are not necessarily the same as the Chinese values. And when the Myanmar, for example, journalists and their scholars and their observers go to China, they do observe that the tremendous economic development that China has achieved in the past 30-something years. But on the other hand, they also see the other side of the picture. They see environmental pollution, they see the air pollution in Beijing, and they do ask themselves the question, do we want that? So yes, the Myanmar people, they do want economic development, but they don't necessarily want to take the same approach that China has taken.
So what's your view on that? I mean, the rules have changed right now, haven't they, because of the election? It's a balancing act now. The Myanmar government has to listen to its people. Chinese investors have to listen to what the Myanmar people want as well.
Yes, and it's got, I think, further compounded by the fact that some of these investments are in ethnic areas. For example, China's pipeline, and where it might have a free trade zone, is an area where the Arakanese are dominant. In the national election, the Arakanese party beat the National League for Democracy in that region, and so it becomes very complicated because you have the military out there, you have the NLD out there, you have the few local governments who did, the few ethnic parties who did manage to show up and do well, and it becomes a very complicated path to navigate. And many of, as I said, the resources are in these ethnic areas, and so it's going to be a immensely difficult process. I think the Indians actually have also stumbled seriously in Arakan state, and so it's not going to be simple. The other ethnic area where the NLD did not get a majority, and in fact the one province, the one area where the USDP, the military aligned party, actually beat the NLD is in Shan State, which borders China. And so the NLD itself is hampered because it doesn't have some of those portfolios by way of which it could have control in those areas at the federal level. At the state level, it doesn't have those. It's an ethnic party governing, and this is going to be very complicated for any investor. And I think it is going to be difficult. And so there's going to need to be a lot of conversation at the ground level by the Chinese, and it's a difficult process. It will be a stop go process, but if you can be committed to it and you can do it transparently, I think it could be it can go forward.
Okay, Victor, I've got about a minute left. Broadly speaking, when we look at the future relationship between these two countries, is there a sense between Myanmar and China that they actually need each other?
Definitely, China and Myanmar will live together. We'll share our destiny together. As far as China is concerned, the more investment from all the other countries, including the United States, Japan, EU, you just name it, the better, because that will really help boost the infrastructure and connectivity in Myanmar. But if the United States want to outspend China and Myanmar, be my guest, do that. But the reality probably will not be that case. Therefore, I think Aung San Suu Kyi is doing the right thing to focus on Myanmar-Chinese relations, and I hope this will set a good example for all the other major countries to really care in substance, but not words or symbolism, about the matters in Myanmar which have a direct bearing on whether the livelihood of the people in Myanmar can be improved in the coming years.
All right, that's where we have to end it. Thanks to all of you for joining us. That's all we have time for, but the conversation continues online. Chat with us about this or any other show on Twitter. We're at cctv_America. We also use Facebook. Find us at facebook.com/cctvamerica. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C. Thanks for being with us.